Hi everyone, my name is Gigi Robinson. Throughout my journey living with a chronic illness, I've always found solace in chasing an escape. For me, that escape has always been the creative world. As a child, I always listened to the Rolling Stones. Thanks, Dad. And like many of you here, I'm sure you have a core memory of listening to a CD or cassette tape or album on repeat in your parents' car because that's what they wanted to you to listen to, even if you didn't like it or want to listen. A song that always felt good, amongst other very electric songs on the Let It Bleed album by the Rolling Stones, was You Can't Always Get What You Want. And for now, I would like you to just keep that in the back of your head as I delve deeper into how this song has shaped who I am today. I'm going to open your eyes to the world of patient advocacy in the era of social media. If you don't know my work, I spend a majority of my time every day on the internet talking to and creating content for communities that represent people living with a variety of health conditions. I fell into this career because of my own experience living with chronic illness and have used it to fuel my success. I went from being an 11-year-old competitive swimmer who dreamed of swimming in the Olympics one day to not being able to compete, to most recently becoming the first Sports Illustrated model to pose in the magazine who openly announced living with a chronic illness. I've ultimately done what I've done because of the way I was able to shift my mindset around living with a chronic illness. Of course, it was not easy, and I had to go through the same things many of you do. Perhaps that meant losing a close friend or partner when you shared what you needed from them. Or maybe having to over explain yourself to a teacher or a boss. Or maybe that simply meant spending a Friday night home alone instead of going out with friends. These are things that are determined by our unique non negotiables when it comes to managing our health and being our own advocate. As I share my experience living with a chronic illness with all of you, I'm going to share how to overcome mindset blocks and create shifts in real time. Throughout my journey, I've learned a lot, and I want to begin by explaining the relationship that I have with myself and my chronic illness, as well as the waiting room around me. In many ways, living with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome has made me who I am today and shaped the way that I view the world around me. It's helped me become a better creator, a better advocate, and most importantly, a better leader. I found that we often spend time internalizing our condition in the form of guilt because we're told that we look okay. Automatically, the ableist world around us tells us we're not worthy because of our impediments and setbacks. And if you live with a chronic condition, autoimmune disease, or mental health disorder, you probably know that feeling all too well. Not everything is built for people who have physical and mental health issues. And knowing that you can look okay and feel completely awful and still have the cards stacked against you is a pain point that most of us living with invisible disease deal with. When people around me challenge or question if I struggle daily because I look okay, I feel a fire within me. And that very spark is what has made me so passionate about bringing awareness to something that is usually not seen in the media at large. A lot of times, invisible illness is overlooked as something we complain about, something to deal with silently because it's not visible. And I'm here to tell you today that it is possible to not only fight that narrative, but to rewrite it. Before I tell you what kind of doctor I saw and how I navigated living with a chronic illness as a teenager and into young adulthood, I'm going to tell you the story of how I got my diagnosis. Let's go back to the teenage years between 10 and 13. Growing up in New York City has been one of the biggest blessings for me because of the medical network around me. Thanks to my mom, I've had the access to some of the best doctors in the world. It seemed as if I were a particularly klutzy child at the time, showing up to emergency rooms with bruises and swollen body parts left and right because my pain had brought me to the ER so often. Some of the on call doctors were from the hospital for special surgery right next door to New York Presbyterian, and they were the ones taking care of me. In some weird twist of fate, they got used to seeing me and my issues. And because of that, it was there that they recommended to us that we seek out a pediatric orthopedist to get a more regular handle on my body, which was seemingly always causing me pain. Did you know that there's more than 100 autoimmune diseases out there and over 50 million Americans suffer with one or more? And of that, two-thirds of those are women. And according to the CDC, rural Americans face numerous health disparities compared to their urban counterparts. It may be hard to comprehend the magnitude and weight that that puts on many people and families living with invisible disease. It means having to travel and pay for accommodations to see that doctors that insurance may not cover, and have the hope that they have an answer for you. And oftentimes, they don't. It draws a lot of attention to the significant gap in health between rural and urban Americans. For instance, having the knowledge about where to get healthcare, being geographically close to it, and being able to have the insurance to cover copious amounts of bills. This is a privilege I do not take lightly as I explain my story and why I feel so passionate to advocate for others who don't have the option to receive specialized or basic health care. It was at 10 years old when I first stress fractured my elbow doing a cartwheel. The doctors were confused, and so were me and my parents. How the heck did I fracture my elbow doing such a normal activity? 6 months later, I twisted my ankle and fractured it, which I re injured after they took the cast off, taking it a total of 9 months to heal. Doctors were confused as why it took such an abnormally long amount of time for a fractured ankle to heal. But we kept looking for answers as to why this was happening to me. And then, the following summer, I jumped off a water trampoline at summer camp, shattering multiple ligaments in my wrist. They put me in a cast and physical therapy, and it took 13 months for me to be fully healed. By then, the doctors at HSS realized something was wrong, and it was not just me being careless and unaware of my surroundings. My pediatric orthopedist was initially the one that connected the dots. 3 consecutive injuries back to back. She suspected the problems I was experiencing were symptoms of hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and suggested I see a pediatric geneticist and rheumatologist. It was there that we got the confirmation of this connective tissue disorder, which causes debilitating pain and comorbidities. It felt like I was jumping through hoops at a circus as I went from one practitioner to the next. And what did I really know about my condition? I was just a kid. I didn't even know what homework I had due the next day. I was just trying to be a normal teenager, faced with endless appointments after school instead of extracurriculars. What others may have thought of me as complaining because they couldn't see what was causing my pain or how bad it really was actually me being extremely persistent and vocal about my body. I learned there that there are a lot of different things that can constitute normal based upon what we go through on an individual level. And for me, normal became learning how to stand up for myself consistently in the medical space. As a result, I was forced to become more in tune with the connection that I had with my body and my mind, much faster than my peers at such a young age. I suspect some of you have experienced a story similar to mine, especially if you were diagnosed at a young age, and even if you were recently diagnosed. It can feel like nobody knows who you are or what is wrong in the world around you. Um, I assure you that if you continue to advocate for yourself, you will find an answer. Being over medicalized is another thing that I absolutely have to address. Explaining to yourself or somebody that you see 4 times a year, once a quarter, about a chronic issue that is trying to get solved is beyond frustrating. And believe me, I've been there a lot, especially once the doctor suspects it's out of their field of work to recommend something, and then they begin to tell you who they're referring you to. And then you get to that new doctor, the one you hope so desperately has the answers to treating people with your condition. You have to humbly explain to them your entire life story, your symptoms, your diagnosis, why you're there to see that specialist, what medications you're on, your diet, your mental health, your activity plan, and pretty much anything else that could help them better understand how they can help you. On average, it can take up to 3 years to take a diagnosis. Most times, though, it takes longer. Like me, you may have found yourself seeing an orthopedist, a geneticist, a rheumatologist, a neurologist, a cardiologist, an immunologist, a gastroenterologist, an ENT, a dermatologist, a psychologist or psychiatrist, an anesthesiologist, an occupational and physical therapist, and more. For non-disabled people, it may be hard to even comprehend the amount of people involved in our health when we say the words medical team. But for us, it's the norm. And with that, it's our job to participate in that team by working together with those who have more knowledge about our conditions to help us function our best and manage our life within the parameters that we're given. So, how do we continue to navigate the same conversations over and over again, especially when our outcome's uncertain? How can we create healthy systems to help us cope with our ailments and find support while doing so? Over the past 2 years, everything has been uncertain. I've really had to come to terms with the fact that my illness is not going to get better. It's not going to magically disappear or go away out of thin air. It's with me for life, and it's only going to get progressively worse. It can only be managed based on lifestyle choices, aided by medication. And similarly to a lot of autoimmune disease, it takes a lot of time to fully understand and process. Heck, I'm 24 years old and I'm still working on this in therapy to this day. To put this into perspective, 90% of the nation's $4.1 trillion healthcare industry comes from people living with chronic disease. So it's a really big deal, and we really need to pay attention to it. This was a particularly challenging obstacle I myself have had to face by truly accepting that I will never have full control over my bodily autonomy. Over the past decade, I realized that I repressed my emotions and feelings about what it's like to live with this chronic illness and what it's really taken away from me. It took my passion for competitive swimming away and put me on the bench during gym period in school because contact sports were the only form of movement that kids were doing in PE. And although this was rough, it led me to find another passion: storytelling through art. It forced me into the category of the other at 10 years old, something nobody wants to be a part of. All we ever want is to feel seen and accepted by our peers. And I began to feel ashamed that I had to use accommodations like a rolling backpack, a scribe, an elevator pass. And throughout middle school and high school, I internalized the judgment that other people placed on me, that systemically society has structured around disabled and chronically ill people. It was then that I had to confront the fact that others had to accept this about me, even if they didn't understand it upon first glance. And as I got older, I really truly began to accept the fact that this is my life. When I was in college, I struggled immensely to balance my life with a chronic illness, being a student, and nurturing my creative passions. At this time in my life, I was seeing numerous different doctors. Again, because I had moved across the country to go to college and had to change up my care team. And we were just trying to figure out what was going on with my body, yet again, which was causing a disruption in my life. You can imagine any kind of specialist, I went to them, and I'm going to spare you that long list again. The last thing that I needed to be worrying about was whether my professor thought I was faking living with an invisible disease. Even saying that out loud sounds preposterous and offensive, and yet I went through it, and I'm sure some of you have too. For those that may not know what it truly means to have your accommodations met according to ADA laws and 504 disability accommodations, let me explain it. The Americans for Disabilities Act, or ADA, is a landmark civil rights legislation enacted in 1990. The ADA's purpose is to ensure that people with disabilities are granted equal access to employment, public service, places of accommodation, transportation, and telecommunication. For me, that meant using a laptop, tablet, or phone, even to take notes during class, missing more classes than other students due to medical appointments and not being penalized for it, having flexibility to turn in assignments to get them done on my own time, even at times having alternative assignments or extra credit to make up for things that I couldn't participate in. And the Office of Accessibility was there to support me, even when my professors didn't believe me. Typically, students and workers with disabilities are not unable or unmotivated to accomplish the same tasks as everyone else, but it's the lack of accessibility and understanding from ignorant bosses, teachers, and coworkers that prohibits us from truly getting the work done and being able to succeed. Not only was I physically very sick, but at the same time, I somehow navigated an academic environment where I was frequently denied my accommodations and accused about lying of the severity of my illness. I had no choice but to find a way to persist and survive within that academic community. And so I decided to use my passion for storytelling, which I developed at such a young age, and image making, and use the show don't tell mentality to express my situation and to truly advocate for my own health when no one else would. It really had me thinking. If there was just a little bit more awareness surrounding chronic illness and disability in the classroom, I think it would have made all the difference for me in my academic pursuit. That's why I created my senior thesis, Discourse Between Myself and the Waiting Room. The book is a detailed photo essay about my experience as a patient. I really struggled with knowing what words to use at the time because, again, I didn't know how to stand up for myself or to advocate for my needs face to face. It left me with no other option but to physically document my journey as a chronically ill patient through this project. And guess what? It ended up making the national news. The New York Post, Teen Vogue, Fox, showcased in the school's newsletter, resulted in me being nominated for 3 years for the WeGo Social Health Awards and more. This project inspired me to do my best to be my own advocate, and it's why I've also devoted my platform to speaking out. I truly wish that I had had that platform to turn to when I was a struggling student, and also that 10-year-old girl for someone to look up to when she just got her diagnosis. And on top of all of this, something we've all experienced was the COVID pandemic. For me and many others, this uncovered a whole new world of accommodations. I was yet again baffled by the way that the world so quickly adapted, creating Zoom meetings left and right, allowing remote flexibility to anyone, anywhere, anytime. This changed the way I was able to learn and work. I found myself thinking about how easily this was done for everybody else and how it could have really played a huge role in helping me achieve academic success, even if it was just the norm a few years prior while I was finishing my undergraduate degree. My experience, unfortunately, is not singular. This was the sentiment I heard roar throughout the disability and chronic illness community during the pandemic. For years, we've been asking for remote and hybrid environments so we could do our job and take care of our physical and mental health with all of the flexibility that we needed. It proved to everyone that working remotely or in hybrid models was productive to workplace ecosystems because it was truly equitable for people with health issues. Digital work and learning gave people who needed accommodations a seat at the table. It gave them an option, a place within a community of workers where they truly held equity. For people who needed closed captioning to read what was being said in meetings, or for those who may have needed alternative descriptions, thanks to AI technology, that was not a problem. For people who had physical impairments, it gave them the ability to work from the comfort of their home and rest when they needed to, or go to a doctor's appointment for work and maybe even do some work from the waiting room as they waited for their doctor to see them. It showed everyone that technology can help us all build together so that everybody has a seat at the table. However, as the pandemic has seemingly been declared over, there has been a lot of virtual and remote tools being taken away, and in turn, accommodations that have helped those living with invisible illness thrive at work and in classrooms disappearing too. That is why I fight to make accommodations a part of our day to day life, and it's why I won't stop talking about it. So, how did I get my mindset to a place where, despite being overlooked or perhaps being looked down upon, to enable and empower me to not only dream of the career that I have, but to be able to live it too? I had to seek the help of others. And by that, I mean I had to ask for help. And I know that can be really challenging for those who are used to doing everything on their own, especially those of us living with invisible disease. We've always been the ones managing, thinking, and advocating for our own healthcare on top of work, social life, and family. When we invite others into our world and share about our condition, we have to trust that they're going to simply understand the struggles we go through from an outside perspective. Because that's not a case a lot of the time, it's extremely difficult to comprehend how others lack the basic compassion for those of us who struggle. The biggest thing that's helped me is to adopt the mentality that it's none of my business what other people think of me, and knowing that I'm doing exactly what I have to do to get by and that everything I need is within. I found that joining support groups online and following other creators in the health advocacy arena has helped me talk about my chronic illness in a space where others understand exactly what it feels like. I realize that other people have also mourned the life before diagnosis and all of the little things that go with it. Sharing our experience living through adversity does not make us weak, but in fact, the opposite. We create communities of like minded people, share tools and stories about how to get through something difficult because of our shared drama. And although people joke about shared trauma on the internet, I do believe it makes us extremely strong. It makes our friendships, our relationships, and work more intentional and meaningful. For me, it's given me some incredible mentors, business partners, and luckily, some of my best friends. And now, today, in the era of social media, as I've grown my career as a creator, I've been bamboozled by the lack of social impact and give back initiatives that influencers and brands participate in. So often, I see accommodations and accessibility in campaign content and at influencer events left out completely. And when called out, it all seems a bit performative when brands react. Where is the line of authenticity and caring about the consumer and the unique niche audience they're a part of who fits into that category of the other? And when do we draw it? It's always been a no brainer for me to give back and help communities that need the help and support. It's a part of who I am and what I do. It's the sole reason why I encourage every creator, caregiver, and patient leader to find a cause that they care about and bring awareness to it at every turn, whether that's online, in the workplace, or even in a simple conversation with someone you just met. There's truly so much work that needs to be done to educate leaders, creators, brands, and organizations on ways to get involved and advocate for patients around them. Over the past decade and a half, I quickly learned that no matter what, I had to adapt my needs to the world that is not meant for chronically ill and disabled people, especially in entertainment and digital landscapes of social media. And though there are spaces that communities occupy within a simple hashtag search or handle or Facebook group, the opportunities that we get are far more slim than our non disabled counterparts. I didn't have a choice but to adapt, to think fast, and to problem solve. And this is why I truly believe that people living through adversity in everything they do are the most fast thinking and resilient people that I know. I've made it my goal to use my platform to partner with some amazing charities and organizations, which has led me here today, speaking to all of you at the Autoimmune Association Summit. This advocacy is integral to my brand, and I will not stop advocating for you. It's my absolute pleasure to address all of you today, and it's such an honor. And most importantly, living with chronic illness and diseases has instilled a mindset of perseverance and toughness I've used to motivate me every day, and I hope that you can too. It's taught me that although you can't always get what you want, if you try sometimes, you just might find that you get what you need. Thank you so much, everyone. My name is Gigi Robinson.